Welcome to Schneps Media's 3 questions in 3 minutes on Politics NY with Skye. We are taking a moment to get to know our mayoral candidates. This interview is one in a series of Schneps Media's Politics NY candidate interviews sponsored by AARP of New York. New Yorkers 50 plus are the city's most reliable voters, accounting for 3 out of 4 ballots cast in the last open mayoral primary. AARP urges all of the City of New York mayoral candidates to remember that 50 plus voters count and to focus on the issues most important to this critical voting block. So with that in mind, I'm here with Catherine Garcia, candidate for mayor. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your little elevator pitch for people who don't know you.
Well, first of all, I fall into the category of over 50. So I'm a lifelong New Yorker, and I love this city. I want to make sure that it's a more livable city and that everyone is thriving here, including older adults. That this is the best place to live if you're over 50.
Skye Ostreicher, thanks so much for coming on the program. A lot to talk about as far as New York stuff that's been going on in the news cycle for the past, I guess, 3 or 4 months. I guess we could even incorporate COVID because it was huge in New York and started in New Rochelle. So Skye, we'll talk about that and everything else, New York politics. Thanks so much for coming on the program today.
Rob, thanks for having me. Thanks for reaching out to me. And you're right, all eyes are on New York. And it's been that way, not just for the last couple of months, but you're right, since the beginning of COVID, all eyes have been on New York and New York City.
Right. So Skye, let's kick this around before we even get into New York City issues. Let's tell the viewers about yourself. So can you tell the viewers a little bit about you? I researched that you went to University of Miami. You have a chemistry degree. We talked a little bit about this briefly before we are going on the air. So can you talk about that firstly?
Yeah, sure. So I went to University of Miami and I studied chemistry there. I was supposed to go to medical school. And when I was there, Donna Shalala was president of the school at the time. And she taught a course for juniors and seniors about her experience working in Bill Clinton's cabinet as his Secretary of Health and Human Services. So I signed up for that course junior year. She brought in President Clinton as a guest speaker to class that day. And that sort of changed my career path. I said, forget medicine. I want to do this. I want to do health policy. So that's when I graduated a year early from University of Miami. I came back home to Long Island and I enrolled at Stony Brook University, which was on Long Island near me. And I did my master's in public health and it turned into a second master's in public policy. And then my life sort of took off in the world of politics and government.
Right. So even going into that, I told you I went to school in Boca Raton. A lot of the people that I'm friends with are from New York, New Jersey area, and they kind of get stuck down in that area of South Florida because it's so much incorporated with that New York, New Jersey culture. A lot of retirees from that neck of the woods in general. What made you want to move back to New York in general? Because like I said, a lot of people just stay down there.
I know a lot of people stay down in South Florida, especially during the pandemic. New York lost, I want to say half our residents, but it wasn't that. We lost a big percentage of our residents to Florida, mostly because of the weather, because it sucked living in an apartment. So why not be outside during COVID? And Florida, you guys didn't wear masks the whole time. I came down, I spent the month of February in Fort Lauderdale and it was like life before the virus again. It was a beautiful thing. But at the time when I went to college, I wasn't thinking like that. When I was there, and actually, when I was back in February, I saw that Brickell is really built up. It's a beautiful place. When I was in school at University of Miami, there were like 2 apartment buildings in Brickell. Do you remember, Rob? Like the whole thing was under construction. So now it's like a whole new world.
Well, the overdevelopment in South Florida in general, from I would say Broward County down to Miami-Dade, is a total disaster. I mean, we could go into environmental issues and go down that road, but it's a long road to travel. But it's really the overdevelopment and the traffic that Florida is starting to look like California in general. And I don't think that's going to be good as far as for people living there. So I agree with you. It's really the building, whether it's homes, whether it's office buildings, or businesses in general are really, the overdevelopment is a big problem, especially in South Florida.
Maybe it's a big problem, but you guys don't have any taxes either. So it's really attractive. It's really attractive. For a while, we thought about moving to Florida permanently during this pandemic.
Well, no, I hear you. I mean, it is like you said, the weather and the pay is not as good for sure than in New York in the Northeast.
Yeah, but you don't have
So
to pay taxes.
that's true. I guess it's safe as eat both out. But anyways, I do want to kick this around. You talked about your love for politics with Donna Shalala meeting President Clinton. How was meeting President Clinton? Did you have any sort of conversation with him, or did he just kind of speak in front of the class?
Yeah, no, I didn't get to meet him one-on-one
Okay.
that day in class, but you could imagine the whole campus was covered in special security and
Right.
secret agents and black Suburbans and men in black everywhere that day. But he just
Right.
spoke at the front of the class, and the two of them talked about their experience working together in the White House. It was inspiring. It really was.
Growing up, because what I found out from, friends and family in general, people that I'm friends with mostly, is that they are what their parents are. If their parents are Democrats, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be Democrats. Is that kind of how you are as far as growing up? Were your parents Democrats? Did they
You know,
speak to you about politics in general?
it's really interesting. My dad's a lifelong Democrat, and his
Mm.
family are all Democrats. But my mom wasn't political. In fact, when after I graduated college, when I did my master's in public policy, how that segued into politics for me, and I ended up working on that political campaign. That's when I registered to vote. I was like 22 and I first
Oh.
registered to vote. And my mom came with me, and we made sure she was a registered Democrat then too. So she wasn't even registered at the time. So then, interestingly enough, when my parents got divorced a couple years ago, now my mom's voter registration is still Democrat, but she voted for President Trump in the last election.
Well, I want to go into that since you just brought that up, because we saw, as a person that follows politics all around the country, but I'm Italian, and we see a lot of Italians that I know personally that are from New York or from the East Coast in general. They voted for President Trump. I know that you report a lot in Staten Island. Obviously, that's kind of a Republican area. We saw President Trump had a big turnout in New York. Why do you feel like that, Italians or people that live in New York and that area of Staten Island really, believed in the president and still believe into him till this day?
I mean, there's a lot of people, right? Long Island too, a
Right.
big red area of Long Island, Staten Island. I don't know if it's necessarily an Italian thing, but my mom is Italian, by the way. But I think it's a lifestyle thing. People are just disenfranchised. There's a lot of, middle class people, right, that are just feeling the same way. And whether it's New York or the Midwest, it's a feeling that resonated with a lot of voters, especially in New York, where there's high taxes, and they didn't want a Democrat in the White House for that reason.
So you're big into politics, of course. What did your mom say to you about why she voted for President Trump?
You want to know what she said?
Okay, yeah.
At the time, the country was falling apart.
Right.
And my mom said, can I say a curse word?
Yeah, go ahead.
She said, we need a motherfucker in the White House.
Right.
And I married a Trump lover too.
Oh, jeez.
Yep.
Now, how does that work out? I always am intrigued by this. I'm not married, but I've dated Republican women in the past, and it's incredible the way they think. For instance, I dated a girl at Lynn, beautiful Italian girl from your neck of the woods, actually. And she said, I had the Obama sign up in my room. She said, why do you have the Obama sign up? I said, well, because I like him. I voted for him in 2008. I'm going to vote for him again. I've worked on his campaign. I actually met the president in person. And she said, well, he's stealing money from my daddy. And I'm thinking, you're like 20 years old and you're saying daddy. Like, what dimension am I living in? But that's just besides the point. But obviously, you're married to a Trump supporter. How is that working out? Is there fights? Is it like, you give up or he gives up when you guys fight about this? So how does it all work?
We've actually never fought about politics. We fight about a lot of other things, and that's a whole nother story. We don't have enough time for that today. But we actually never thought about politics. And that's when I really developed my Instagram handle, the Fashionable Democrat, which really began as me dressing fashionably in the workplace, working in Democratic politics. But once I, hooked up with this Trump supporter, the Fashionable Democrat became a different meaning. It meant bipartisanship is fashionable. Working across the aisle is fashionable. It's forward thinking. It's something new, because you talk about dating. I remember being on the dating apps and seeing people in 2016, right, that said, don't message me if you voted for Hillary, or don't message me if you voted for Trump. It's an extremely divisive thing, but we got to just work things out. So that's where bipartisanship comes into it. We just got to work through the issues.
I know you worked on Mike Bloomberg's campaign. As a person that's a young Democrat, I don't know if you're progressive or not, so I won't say that. But regardless of the point, why do you feel like a lot of young people call themselves progressives instead of, Democrats in general? We're seeing more young people in 2016, in 2020 rather, go toward the Bernie Sanders realm of the party, go toward Elizabeth Warren, since Hillary Clinton did not run again. Why do you feel that is, as a person that doesn't describe themselves as that type of person in the Democratic Party?
You know what it is? Our generation, the millennial generation, we're known as a generation. We're like the first generation that didn't do better than the generation before us, right? Like our median income is like lower than the equivalent of what it was for our parents, right? So everyone owes us something. That's why the older generation hates millennials, right? Then comes the next generation. I have to find a meme that described Gen Z, but it was like, blah, 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 the ones who eat Tide Pods, right? Like,
that was sick, by the way.
Or at least responsible. That generation, forget it. So it's the younger kids that we're hearing are progressives. They want to do things like abolish the police, right? What's going to happen in New York City? Imagine, where we have cameras on every street corner. What's going to happen? What do people think is going to happen if we abolish the police?
I don't think a lot of the progressives, at least the progressives that I know, want to fully get rid of police. I think I agree with you. That's insane.
There are some that do, right?
Right.
Okay.
But that is insane. But I think more people, those people are insane, like I said, but more people want to say, yes, we need to have police, but we need to have more oversight. We can't just have Bill de Blasio or Rudy Giuliani or Mike Bloomberg let the police do whatever the hell they want, have no oversight. We go back to Eric Gardner, we other police issues, Michael Brown, and the list goes on and on, but just specifically Eric Gardner, because that did happen in New York. And it just doesn't seem that a lot of these police departments have a lot of oversight. And the policemen, yes, they do have a tough job. My parents were both in law enforcement. I understand what it is. But the thing is that there's no oversight. There's no if they do something wrong, a lot of these policemen, they just get paid vacation, or they get to sit out for a little bit. So that's kind of where I feel where a lot of these people are saying. But, I agree with you. If somebody says abolish the police fully, I don't think that's correct.
I think it's just a meeting of the minds and a meeting of the generations. And that's, as technology comes into play, now they all wear the body cameras and all these instances are recorded. People can film things like the Eric Garner, everything's filmed now on an iPhone. George Floyd too, I think it's just a matter of keeping up with the times and having the new ideas mixed with the old ideas. And sometimes, think of our parents, they're technically challenged with a lot of things, right? Even we've seen on Zoom, it's hard for some people. Well, imagine taking technology and modern issues and merging it with people from the generation before us. It's really a matter of new, younger people are coming into power, and we have to start listening to them, right? It's the millennials. We're electing other millennials right now, and other millennials are becoming the CEOs of organizations and the leaders of organizations. So there's going to be a switch, a dramatic shift in how every agency, government agency, organizations, working from home. That wasn't something any of us imagined 2 years ago. A lot of organizations said, they had a policy, you can't work from home. It's reimagining literally everything about the way we do every single thing.
So I want to get into this. Again, you worked on Mike Bloomberg's campaign. it didn't end well. I believe Elizabeth Warren really put the knife in Mike Bloomberg throughout that debate performance. Maybe you disagree, but
No.
she had some pretty dang good lines. I give her credit for that. But regardless of that, as working on the campaign, what do you feel like the mayor did wrong?
What that Bloomberg did wrong.
Correct, yes.
He really should have fired back and said, look, Liz, you lied about being Native American. You know what I mean? Like he didn't
That's right.
have the comeback. It kind of reminds me of my dad, just like a goofy guy. He really didn't have the stage presence that everyone was hoping, right? There was such a buildup and such momentum about Mike Bloomberg with all his money and all of his commercials. Like everyone thought he was going to come out on the stage and be a rock star, but he really wasn't. And that screwed him up. He didn't win any of the states on Super Tuesday.
So did you know the mayor personally, or why did you want to work on his campaign specifically?
So I actually didn't even live in New York City while he was
Oh.
mayor. I didn't live here until afterwards. But
Mm.
from the way that he governed and the way that I know about him and the people that were working with him in his mayoralty that I was friends with, seemed like if he's gonna run for president, he would be my guy. And I'm a moderate. I know you mentioned progressive Democrat. There's all kinds of Democrats. I consider myself a really, down the middle or old school Democrat, moderate Democrat. And that's the way that Mike Bloomberg governed this city.
Skye Ostreicher here on Fire Breathing Rob. You can definitely check out her work on YouTube. It's PoliticsNY with Skye. Definitely type that in. And also the Fashionable Democrat on Instagram. And also her website is also thefashionabledemocrat.com. Definitely check her out. Skye, let's go into New York issues. It seems like there's been a lot of bad news coming out of most cities, but especially New York City. We saw the Black Lives Matter protests. We're kind of out of control in most cities, but also New York also. Obviously, there's going to be eviction crisis and a housing issue in New York, but also all over the country. Do you believe that COVID really made these issues worse than even they were before?
Of course it did. The pandemic changed the way we'll do everything now. If you think of New York City, even the way people go to work, right? The city is known for all the commuters to come into Manhattan during the day and go back at night or stay here at night. But now with these big office buildings in Midtown, what's going to happen to them? Big law firms that have one square city block are not requiring their lawyers to come into the office, their bankers to come into the office. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen to that space? What's going to happen to the storefronts downstairs? What's going to happen to the places like the salad bars and places that are only open during the week if they're not catering to workers during the week? So I think that's just one example, but if you think about it, it's a cascade of every single issue. And the reason why all eyes were on New York City, yes, we were the epicenter of COVID. And it was Governor Cuomo, New York's governor, that everyone was watching all over the country with these updates. And we have the most people here. So that's why all eyes were on the center of the universe here while it was happening.
So what are people saying on the ground? We talked about at the beginning of the interview, rather, that there is so many people talking about New York City within the past few months. We saw Andrew Cuomo was on the TV, as you said, almost every day doing these news briefings about what was going on with COVID. Now, months later, where there was a few news organizations that were reporting this about the mishandling of the nursing home crisis in New York, but also the sexual allegations against the governor. So with all that said, what are people telling you about those two issues? Do you feel like this is going to hurt the governor even more than it has already? We were hearing, a couple weeks back that the governor may step down. Now that's turned out that won't happen, or he may not, come up for re-election. What is that on the ground feeling that you're feeling about Andrew Cuomo?
The on the ground feeling is mixed, but if you look at these local polls that are here in New York City or in New York, people still love the governor. And like you said, he was there as the guiding force every day watching the news briefings. Friends from around the country were watching our governor with these news briefings every day. And there were articles at the time in the New York Post that were calling him the love gov, that women were like falling in love with him through the TV, because every day at 11 a.m. it was like this sweet older Italian man, he has this warm way about him. hey, sugar, whatever he says, and then these poor sexual allegations came out against him. And in his defense, he says, I'm a warm guy and I hug and I kiss. And I know that that could be looked at as that's just an excuse. But if you've met the governor, that is how he is. But also, if you've worked for the governor, and I've heard stories, horror stories about people who have worked for him, that he's such an egomaniac. And of course, he attacked these women and made them feel insecure and pressured. So I understand all sides of the story. But overall, I think people still love him. And no, I don't think he's going to step down, because if he's the egomaniac that everyone says he is, then of course it's not going to hurt him.
Will he run for re-election though? What do you think?
Yeah, I think he would.
Okay. All right. Because I did interview Lindsey Boylan, who was one of the first people to come out, and she spoke about the, the issues that she had with the governor. Right. So let's go to this. So I do want to talk about the primaries coming up on June 22nd. Early voting's already started this past weekend. With that said, obviously the mayor's race is the huge race, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what is the other race that you believe that people should be watching for?
So my show, PoliticsNY with Skye, I've been interviewing every single candidate that's running for New York City office this year. So that's not just the mayor and the public advocate and the district attorney. It's all the different city council races. Here in New York City, we have 51 city council members. 37 of them were term limited. So they're going to all need new, that's more than half the city council, 37 out of 51. And for each and every council race, there could be up to 13 different people running for each seat. And in a world like this, where we've been locked inside, there's no opportunity to go out and meet these people for breakfast, at a cocktail party, at a fundraiser. So how are we getting to know them if we can't be out there meeting them? And there's so many different candidates, and they're all Democrats. In New York, this is a Democratic primary. Everyone's a Democrat. So unless you make an Excel spreadsheet and you can compare people and their policies, it's very hard to discern who's who, because at the end of the day, they're all same. So I think it comes down to personality. So that's my series, PoliticsNY with Skye. It's 3 questions in 3 minutes. They're not politics questions. They're who are you, what's inspiring you, and what's your number one issue, and tell us something fun about yourself. That's what the series has been. And it's been really popular because that's the way to engage someone. You got to connect with someone, find a common ground, and inspire that person. Right.
Right. So when did you start, I guess, NY with Skye?
Yeah, the PoliticsNY with Skye. It started in February. So I've been working on this since February, interviewing every single candidate. I've interviewed about close to 300 different candidates. Wow. And it's all on YouTube. It's all on Instagram, politicsny.com, PoliticsNY with Skye. That's the hashtag. You type in any politician in New York City, you type in their name in Google along with my name and PoliticsNY, and the 3-minute video will pop up. Yeah,
nice. And you've interviewed many influential people. I saw that on there, which was impressive. So did you get this idea? I know you said you just started it this past year. Was this your idea? Did somebody come to you and say, hey, you should do this?
Rob, I've been locked in a 1-bedroom apartment for a year and a half now. Okay. I was unemployed at the beginning of the pandemic. I sat here and I was going nuts. They talk about everyone developing mental illness during this time.
Right.
I was one of those people. Okay. So I sat here with my laptop and I said, what the fuck am I doing? So I went through my phone and I'm thinking, I know so many people, and all eyes are on New York City. All eyes are on our government officials. That's who's calling the shots. Who's telling us if we can leave the house, wear a mask, get a vaccine, stay inside, get COVID tested, leave the country, leave the state. Who's making these rules? Go outside, curfew. It's our government officials. So I said, let me start interviewing them and use my connections to my advantage and put it on social media.
What do you hope PoliticsNY with Skye grows to?
I don't know. You want to dream big? I'll be the next Megyn Kelly.
Okay. Hey, I don't think she's even on TV anymore. I think she's making a lot of money still, and I don't think she's on TV.
Whoever it is, the next broadcast star.
All right. But you want to stay in politics regardless, or you want to get on TV and and talk politics. So what is your,
I mean, I never sought out to do this. It kind of happened by accident, but I'm really
right?
enjoying it. I'm really enjoying because I'm a people person.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I really believe that this comes down to personality. And I've moderated 50 plus debates for all these different seats that are up for grabs. And the questions that come in, because I moderate and there's a live audience and they type in the questions, and the questions are not about specific policies. The questions are, who's the most progressive candidate? Who's most to the left? What do the people think about public safety? What do the candidates think about public safety? And, you know, can you ask the candidates something that they like about one another? People want to see personality.
Yeah. No, you're right. I know we're running out of time now. Skye Ostreicher here on Fire Breathing Rob, Politics NY with Skye. Definitely check her out on YouTube, and also the Fashionable Democrat on Instagram, and also the fashionabledemocrat.com. So what are we seeing right now as far as the New York mayoral race? What is your prediction? What do you hear on the street?
Here's the thing. I've interviewed 9 of the mayoral candidates.
Mhm.
And you can watch all my videos on politicsny.com and on my Instagram page. But this is anyone's race. And you know why? It's because of ranked choice voting.
Right.
For the first time, you can pick 5 candidates on your ballot. You don't just pick one. So if you pick someone as your number 1 choice, your number 2 choice, and that person isn't in the final 1 and 2, your ballot still counts. So it's anyone's race. I think we're going to see some weird stuff, some unpredictable stuff this year because of this.
Well, I know Garcia got endorsed by the New York Times, which is a huge endorsement, of course, in any kind of race.
Right.
But, you know, obviously you have the name recognition of Andrew Yang, who is not, I don't believe he's the most progressive guy, but I think he has name recognition, and he's had some ups and downs in the race. And then Eric Adams, obviously being a police officer, being the borough president, he obviously has tons of name recognition. So you would say that maybe those 3 or 4 are at the top, right? Diana Morales is pretty much out of it, I would think, right now.
Yeah, Diane Morales. Maya Wiley has been a big name recently with the progressives especially. But yes, Andrew Yang, Eric Adams, Scott Stringer's also running. He had some allegations of some sexual harassment. So who knows how that'll impact him. And I don't know if we want an old white guy, you know?
Skye Ostreicher, well, let's definitely do this again. I know when the computer went off, we kind of went haywire for a second, but we'll edit that out. Skye, my last question is, for the people that are just learning about you now, and obviously I hope that they watch Politics NY with Skye and definitely check you out, because obviously New York is the biggest city in the world. We need to know what's going on in that city because they shape what goes on in the rest of the country. Excuse me, that's what I personally believe.
Yep.
But what do you want to leave the viewers with as far as a message to them? Maybe it's a hopeful message, maybe it's a message about your show, can be anything.
Well, any viewer in New York, tune in to Politics NY with Skye. And for any voter anywhere, I think it's important to pay attention to who's running for office and get a sense of who they are.
Right.
A lot of times the news doesn't capture that. The news captures specific issues and getting these candidates' opinion on the issues. And it's very hard to decide what kind of person that politician is when they're just talking about the issues. So shout out to independent journalism, hyper local journalists, people like you, Rob, that's leveraging the internet to connect with other people's like me. I think that it's up to us, millennials and entrepreneurs, to really elicit more of a feeling from politics. And I think as the younger generation comes in to power, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more about this theme, about personality, the people behind the politics.
Skye Ostreicher here on Fire Breathing Rob. Again, the Fashionable Democrat. Look up her on Instagram, fashionabledemocrat.com. Check out her personal website. Skye, I agree with you 100%, and that was a great way to end. And I will say this again, shout out to you. I'm not a New York resident, but I love what you're doing. And it's nice to see also a person that's around my age doing the same thing. And we got to keep, like you said, the independent media out there because, again, the mainstream media has their own prerogative. We're trying to bring out stories here, you know, and bring out people that are millennials or do have a good story to tell, whether it's politics, lifestyle, or sports, and try to get them that exposure. So I know we're only on like 20 radio stations and they're low-level radio stations, but we try to get people out there. So Skye, I appreciate you, and I hope we can do this again down the road.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Rob. This has been really great.